All right, time for another custom critique, and this time we're with Cheryl. She was one of my workshop students not long ago in February, and she had a question about taking multiple images for balancing the dynamic range in an image. And so some people call that high dynamic range. I like to call it dynamic range balancing. And so we're going to go through that subject right now. The software we're going to use is DxO Photo Lab to process the raw images and to do some global changes on the image. And then we're going to use Photoshop to finish the image off for sizing and any work that necessitates layers. So let's go ahead and get started. We're in Photolab and we're looking at the two images that she sent me, this one and this one right here. And one is brighter than the other, but they're really not that much brighter. And if we look over here on the left, at the EXIF information, we show that the image that's in the workspace right now is shot at 1/50th of a second, and then the darker image, which I'm sure she was trying to expose for the sky up here, was shot at 1/80th of a second. And what I would suggest is that you take more than just 2 or 3. You might take 5 and go from kind of very, very light to very, very dark. And that way, within that 5 series of images, you're going to have 2 or 3 maybe if you need it, that will have the variance in luminosity that will better match your final product. In other words, you got more to choose from when you go to combine different images. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do with these. And of course, we have this one that we're exposing for the sky, and then this one, which I'm sure was exposing for the foreground. And again, I would say boost that just a little bit. So what I want to do at this point is in DxO Photolab 2, I'm going to choose this image, Command D to create a duplicate, and then I'm going to take the duplicate and I'm going to boost the shadows just a bit and see what that does. And it kind of makes it flat, so I don't want to go there. Let's don't use that one. All right, let's just double click to take it back to 0. So instead what we'll do is come up here and do exposure compensation and see what that does. And that gives us a better result. But I'm going to try one more thing up here, and let's see what the histogram will do. So we'll grab that and bring it over. And I think I'm liking that the best of all. So let's go ahead and leave that adjustment right where it is. Maybe bring this up here just a bit. Perfect. That's exactly what we want right there. All right, so we're going to take this image and process them as a TIFF. But the one thing you have to realize is that about this image, since we did boost the brightness in the image, we did introduce noise. So we're going to have to come down to the noise removal section and make some adjustments. Now, we didn't introduce a lot of noise. This is a 5D Mark IV, which of course is a very good camera. So let's take a look at the one-to-one view on this and see if we see any obvious noise. And I'll go ahead and disconnect the noise section just to see what we have, an untreated image. And I don't see any that's obvious, but as we process the image, if there is noise in there, then it's going to be more and more prevalent the more we do to the image. Not that we're going to massage this to death, but I don't want to worry about introducing any noise. So what I think what we're going to do is let it deal with the noise that we don't see, if that makes any sense to you. So let's go ahead and readjust this luminance down here and the chrominance down about right there. And I think that's going to be enough to help. Usually, Photolab's initial default settings on the noise reduction tends to be a bit heavy-handed, so I always like to back off, and I've had exemplary results when I do that. And also, if you process in prime, it does take longer. I will admit to you, it does take longer, but you'll get an unbelievably clean image on the other side. So let's go ahead and choose these 3. Now, the one thing I want to do to all of these images is boost the color just a bit. So let's come up here and find vibrancy, and let's boost that and just see what we have. We're just making adjustments here to see what we end up with. And I don't see anything wrong with that. So let's go ahead and boost the vibrancy up to 59. Saturation maybe just a tiny bit, maybe no more than 10. Less is more on this kind of stuff. You can go nuts. So let's go ahead and export these. And of course, we're going to use the ProPhoto RGB color space. We're going to 16-bit processed as a TIFF with no compression. So let's go ahead and export these. I'm going to make a change right here. Let's see, volume 2, BOL 2. dash, just a change from what we did previously. Go ahead and hit export. And then I'm going to go ahead and advance forward from this point to take it to the other side of the export process. It's going to take about 4 minutes just to process these 3 images, but that's because of the prime noise reduction algorithm that we chose for these. So we'll go ahead and push forward. And it's finished, so let's go ahead and navigate to Bridge, and we'll find our images. Let's see where they are right here. So here we have this one, and this one. And you'll notice we have detail in the sky, and then here is the image that we boosted. No, this is the image that we boosted right here. So let's go ahead and just delete this one. We don't need it. We're going to do this one and this one. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, right-click, open with Photoshop CC. Now we're going to finish these off. This is a very straightforward process, a good way to learn layers too, I might add. All right, so with step 1 that we're going to do is we're going to left-click, hold it down, and we're going to drag this image off the dock in the workspace and let it become a floating image. And you'll see it floating right there. And then we come get the Move tool, put the cursor inside the floating image, hold down the Shift key, left-click, drag it over, let go, and it's automatically inserted into the layer stack over here on the right side of the workspace. So what we want to do is we want the lower half of this image to combine with the upper half of this image, and it's just a very straightforward process. We'll go ahead and establish a mask right here. Come get my brush right here. And let's take a look at the settings for the brush, because that's going to be important. Right now I'm going to go with 100% opacity and flow at 100%. Now, one thing I'll say about the brush tool is that if you ever want to gradually blend in your foreground over a mask, and we'll do that in just a minute, you'll want to adjust the flow and not the opacity. If you adjust the opacity and leave the flow at 100%, you'll leave artifacts on your image. So always just adjust the flow and never the opacity. So with that said, let's go ahead and increase the size of the brush with the right bracket key. And I am going to go with 100% on both those settings, and let's see what we get. And actually, I tend to believe that that's just a bit much. So let's go ahead and start again. And this time, what I'm going to do is come up and I'm going to set the flow at about 4% right there. And you're thinking that's kind of a low setting. Well, that's because I just want to blend it in. So you can see how gradually it's coming in, and I don't want too much in there. And I think that last 100% setting on the brush was just too much. So let's just blend this in and increase it. We don't want it to overwhelm the image. I think that's about got it. Now take a look at the mask over here, and you can see it's not 100% blotted out, but we've taken out a good part of the mask. And I think that's about right. That's about where the image needs to be. So at this point, I'm going to come up here. I'm going to flatten the image because I like what we have so far. Then I'm going to hit Command-J, and then Command-J again to create 2 copy layers. I'm going to take layer 1, disconnect the third or top layer. Then I'm going to come up to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and yes, we're going to open Adobe Camera Raw, and I never use Adobe Camera Raw except for this. The clarity slider down here in the lower right-hand corner. The clarity slider is really, really well built. It executes wonderfully, and it doesn't degrade any of the image. It doesn't create any artifacts, at least none to speak of. So I use it quite a bit. So let's take a look at what it's going to do to the sky. We're going to go just over a little bit, and it's bringing out the detail. Now, don't worry about what it's doing right here in the foreground. I know that looks horrendous. We only care about what it's doing to the sky. And then let's adjust the dehaze slider. Sometimes you use clarity and dehaze hand in hand. Let's see what happens. Ooh, I like that. All right, let's just keep that. Don't go crazy with it. See how far we only adjusted it, plus 25. We're going to go kind of heavy-handed on the clarity, though, so let's go about 80 on that right there. We'll boost the vibrance while we're here just to see what happens to the sky. Yeah, I like that blue, that intense blue. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit OK. Come to the top layer, activate it so you can see it, create a mask, get the brush, and yes, we're going to blend it in. So we got tight spaces up there. Let's reduce the size of the brush with the left bracket key, just like that. And then we'll just come in and start at the top left and just sweep back and forth. And you don't have to sweep back and forth. You can sit in one place and peck. But in this case, we got kind of we want a uniform result, so we don't want all these blotches of erasure on the mask. You know, I think that's looking good. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and increase the flow to 100% because I'm real happy with what we got here. So let's just go ahead and go crazy, like Bob Ross would say. Let's refine this just a bit. You can take it down into the rocks just a little bit. But I want to correct this part right here on Half Dome. Let's bring that back the way it was. Okay, there we have it. We've got two areas of the image blended together to create a nice final image. And if you were standing at tunnel view, this is what your eye would see. So notice the pattern here on the mask that we erased, and that's about as good as it's going to get for this image. Let's go ahead and flatten the image. And now that we're done with it, let's go ahead and go File, Save As, and we'll put at the end of this, let's get rid of that other TIFF. That was stupid. Let's call it Final. And then let's take a look at two of my images, three of them actually, so that I can show you really kind of the way you need to approach this. What we did before was the best that we could do, but the process could be improved if you just broaden the exposure levels of your scene, of your capture. So let's go ahead. And we're going to open these three images in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and do that. Open with Adobe Photoshop CC. And we have these three images. And of course, this one exposed for the sky with the dramatic lighting and clouds. And then we have this one, which is exposed for the river right here, specifically exposed for the river. And then we have this one that brings out detail in the trees, which was the hardest to get. And we're going to combine all three of these images for a really nice final result. So let's go ahead and take a look. And I want to go dark down, which means I start at the top with the darkest image and then introduce everything below that. It's just the way I work. So we're going to click on this one, left click, hold it down, pull the image off the dock, and then come up and get the Move tool, click on it, put the cursor inside the floating image, hold down the Shift key, left click, hold it down, drag it, and then let go of the mouse, and then let go of the Shift key. And we can test it and make sure everything is in line, which it is lined up, and that's a good thing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this image and do the exact same thing, left click, hold it down, drag it across, let go, and so now we have all three images in the stack. Now I'm going to rearrange a lot of these, so let's go ahead, hit Command J to get a copy layer of the darkest image, and I want to move this to the top, just like that, and then I want it right below the brightest area, and that's going to make sense to you in just a minute. But the first thing I want to do is go ahead and put on a mask on the top layer, come get the brush. I want the flow to be at 2% because I really want to gradually introduce this foreground. So 2%. And then this is about the right size for the brush, at least initially. It's black, so that's a good thing. We have a white mask. Let's go ahead and start sweeping across and just gradually bring in that foreground. And as you come across the top area of the foreground where it meets the horizon, just make sure you don't go up into the horizon because it's not going to look right. I mean, I understand you want to bring in the detail that's right below the horizon, but you can only do that to a certain degree. Unless you want to get a real small brush and do a lot of detail sweeping, and the effort really isn't worth it. You're getting real close. All right, we just keep going across. I'm going to kind of brighten up these edges right here just a bit. All right, now it's coming through. You can see the detail of the trees, but it's looking a little bland, a little pale. So what I want to do is click on Layer 2, come up to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and I think you know where I'm going. I'm going to take that clarity slider and see if we can't make those trees stand out a little more so it won't look quite so bland. And then we can take clarity, go across, and I think that's going to work just fine. In fact, I want to get a little heavy with it. Let's go ahead and really paste it on there. Take it up to about 80. Hit OK. And now you can see the trees just a little bit better, and that is a good thing. So let's go ahead and take this to flatten image. Okay, now we're going to work with the river. You'll notice the reflection in the river here doesn't match anywhere near what is appearing in the sky, and we want to correct that and at least try to approximate it a little closer. So let's go ahead and create a copy layer, and then I want to come get one of these floating images over here. We'll take this one, and again, what do we do, class? We come get the Move tool, drop it into the layer stack just like this. Let's go ahead and reposition the panel because the floating images reside behind the workspace, just so you know. All right, let's reposition these layers. I'm going to take layer 2, put it below layer 1. I'm going to go ahead and click layer 1. And what we're going to do is make a selection of this reflection. So I want to segregate that area. Let's go ahead and get the lasso tool, and we'll just come over and just literally paint a lasso around the reflection. Okay, now next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to 100% on this image so we can see what we're doing. Let's back out just a little bit. I do want to get it all in there. Okay, now let's go to Select, Color Range, and that looks almost perfect, almost immediately. Let's adjust the fuzziness just a little bit. Now, one thing about this color range sampler, I want to show you something not to do. When you get the fuzziness way down here like this, look at the artifact that you create right here. See that artifact around the edge of those trees, the reflection of those trees? That's what you want to avoid, and that's what you want to adjust away. So we take that fuzziness and we adjust it to the right until we don't see that artifact, or at least it's at its very minimum acceptable level. Now let's go ahead and hit OK. We'll take that, and then we'll just go to this view right here. And it's a simple matter of hit delete, and look at that. And then we'll come up and we will deselect. And look how much better that looks. And we can improve the appearance of that reflection. We click on the second layer, go to Image, Adjustments, Curves. Let's go ahead and bring the brightness down because it is a bit too bright, and you can see all that detail coming up, and it matches the sky so much better. That is such an improvement. Let's see what happens if we boost the saturation just a little bit, which I don't think is a good idea, but let's just see what it looks like. Looks out of place. Let's go ahead and just cancel that. And we'll call it done, and then we merge these together, flatten the image, and we have a finished product. And there is what you would see if you stood on this little cliff over the Colorado River in central Texas.